The desert wind tore across the Arizona territory like a living thing, hot and restless, carrying dust that stung the eyes and coated the tongue. Ethan Cole rode through it alone, hat pulled low, collar turned up against the grit. He preferred the quiet life now, cattle, open sky, and the slow rhythm of ranch work, but the frontier had a way of dragging a man back into trouble. The first gunshot cracked through the air like lightning splitting rock. Ethan froze in the saddle. A second shot followed, then shouting, rough male voices echoing from somewhere beyond the ridge ahead. He didn't hesitate. Digging his heels into his horse's flanks, he rode hard toward the sound, cresting the rise just as the scene below came into view. In the dry arroyo beneath him, 5 men surrounded a lone Apache woman. The outlaws wore black dusters despite the heat, red bandanas masking their faces. One of them fired again, the bullet kicking sand at the woman's feet. She stood her ground, a knife in one hand, a short bow slung across her back. Her dark braids whipped in the wind, and even outnumbered, she moved with fierce precision, dodging, striking, refusing to fall. Ethan raised his rifle. He took aim and fired. One outlaw dropped instantly. Before the others could react, Ethan fired again, knocking another man backward into the dirt. Chaos erupted. The remaining 3 scattered for cover, shouting curses. Ethan charged down the slope, revolver drawn now. The Apache woman seized the moment. She lunged forward, slashing one man across the arm and disarming another with a swift kick that sent his pistol skidding across the sand. Ethan's third shot shattered the confidence of the last attacker. Within minutes, the gang retreated, dragging their wounded and vanishing into the shimmering horizon. Silence settled heavily over the arroyo. Ethan dismounted slowly, keeping his weapon lowered but ready. The woman turned toward him. A thin line of blood marked her cheek, but her posture remained proud, unbroken. Their eyes met. "I am Nijoni of the White Mountain Apache," she said, her voice steady as stone. "You fought beside me. You saved my life." Ethan gave a small nod. "Name's Ethan Cole." Didn't seem right lettin' 5 men take on one woman. She stepped closer, studying him as if weighing his spirit. "In my people's law," she said quietly, "a man who risks his life for a woman binds his spirit to hers." Ethan frowned slightly. She held his gaze without hesitation. "You are my husband now." Ethan stared at her, certain he had misheard. The desert wind hissed between them, tugging at his coat as if urging him to respond. "Ma'am," he began carefully, lowering his revolver, "I reckon you're mistaken, bravery for common decency." Nijoni's expression did not change. Her dark eyes were steady, assessing, as though she were studying not just the man before her but the weight of his spirit. "You rode into death without knowing my name," she replied. "Among my people, that is not common." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly aware of how close they stood in the empty arroyo. "Where I come from, you don't stand by while a gang tears someone apart. That's all." She stepped past him to retrieve a fallen arrow, movements graceful despite the fight they had just survived. "The black vultures do not forgive interference," she said quietly. "They will return. For me. And now for you." That settled the matter more than talk of marriage ever could. "Then I reckon you shouldn't be alone," Ethan said. "I've got a ranch 2 days south. Or I can ride you back to your people." Nijoni slung her bow over her shoulder. "You will ride with me north. My tribe must know what happened." They set off before the sun dipped too low, keeping a steady pace across the rugged land. The desert shifted into rocky hills and scattered juniper. As they rode, Ethan became aware of how silently she moved in the saddle, how her gaze constantly scanned the horizon. She was no helpless victim, she was a warrior forced into a moment of vulnerability. Near dusk, they found tracks trailing them, boot prints and horseshoes cutting through the dust. "They follow," she murmured. Ethan dismounted to examine the signs. 3, maybe 4 left. "They're keeping distance." That night, they camped in a narrow canyon. Ethan kept the fire low while Najoni crushed herbs to press against the cut on her cheek. In the flickering glow, she spoke of her people, the White Mountain Apache, of broken treaties, stolen land, and the growing boldness of outlaw gangs who preyed on both settlers and tribes. "You fight for survival," Ethan said softly. "We all do," she answered. A sudden gunshot shattered the quiet, striking sparks from the canyon wall. More shots followed, echoing violently in the confined space. The black vultures had returned. Ethan grabbed his rifle as Najoni moved beside him without fear. Back to back they stood, firing into the darkness. The canyon thundered with gunfire and shouted threats. When the smoke finally thinned, the outlaws retreated once more, this time leaving their wounded behind. Breathing hard, Ethan glanced at her. She met his eyes calmly. "You see now," she said. "Our spirits are already fighting as one." They reached the White Mountain Apache encampment as the sun bled red across the horizon, staining the sky like a warning. Smoke from cooking fires curled upward into the evening air, and the scent of cedar drifted through the trees. Ethan barely had time to take in the circle of lodges before warriors emerged from the shadows, silent and swift, bows drawn and arrows aimed squarely at his chest. His horse shifted nervously beneath him. Najoni raised her hand and spoke sharply in her language. Her voice carried authority, cutting through the tension like a blade. The warriors did not lower their weapons, but they did not fire either. An older man stepped forward from the center of the encampment. His hair was streaked with gray, his posture straight despite his years. Beaded necklaces rested across his chest, and his eyes were calm, weighing, ancient. Najoni dismounted and stood before him. She spoke at length, recounting the attack, the gunfire, the way Ethan had ridden into danger without hesitation. The elder listened without interruption. Finally, his gaze shifted to Ethan. "You are the one who fought beside her." "Yes, sir," Ethan answered, sliding down from his saddle and removing his hat. "Did what I could." "You shed blood in her defense?" "Yes." A long silence followed. The wind stirred the leaves overhead, and somewhere a child laughed, unaware of the tension tightening the circle. "In our law," the elder said at last, "such an act binds spirits. But spirit must be tested before it is honored." Ethan felt every eye in the encampment settle on him. "You will face 3 trials," the elder continued. "Not of strength alone, but of heart." The first trial came at dawn. Ethan was sent into the hills with nothing but a rope and instructed to capture a wild mustang that had never known a bridle. The animal fought like the storm itself, nearly trampling him twice. By the time Ethan secured the rope around its neck, his ribs ached and his hands were raw, but he refused to let go. When he led the exhausted but unharmed mustang back to camp, murmurs of respect rippled through the watchers. The second trial tested his honor. Before eating, he was given a small portion of food and told to decide its use. Without hesitation, he carried it to an elderly widow seated alone near the edge of the camp and placed it in her hands. The third trial was the hardest. Standing before the gathered tribe, hat in hand, Ethan spoke plainly. "I didn't ride into that fight expecting anything. I helped her because it was right. But somewhere along the way, I started hoping she'd keep riding beside me." Najoni stepped forward, pride shining in her eyes as the elder slowly raised his staff in approval. Morning came wrapped in gold, the first light spilling over the mountains and into the valley like a blessing. The camp stirred with quiet purpose. Women arranged woven blankets and silver ornaments, warriors stood watch along the tree line, and children whispered excitedly at the edge of the gathering. Ethan stood near the central fire, freshly washed, his hat band replaced with a strip of hand-beaded leather gifted by the tribe. He had faced gunfire without flinching, but this, standing before an entire people to claim a place among them, made his pulse thunder. Najoni emerged from her family's lodge dressed in soft deerskin adorned with turquoise and feathers that caught the sunlight. She looked every bit the warrior he had first seen in the arroyo, yet there was something gentler in her expression now, certainty, not command. The elder stepped forward, speaking words in Apache that Ethan did not fully understand but felt deeply. A woven cord was placed in their hands, binding their wrists together as a symbol of shared path and shared burden. Ethan cleared his throat and spoke simply. I vow to stand when you stand, fight when you fight, and never turn my back on you. Najoni answered in her own tongue before repeating in English, your spirit walks with mine. Where you go, I go. The tribe answered with a unified cry, and for a moment, the world felt balanced. It did not last. Before the celebration feast could begin, a scout rode in hard from the southern ridge. Dust trailed behind him like smoke. He dismounted and spoke urgently to the elder. The black vultures had not dissolved into the desert as hoped. They had joined forces with another outlaw band and were riding toward the valley, seeking revenge, not just against Ethan, but against the tribe that sheltered him. Ethan felt the weight of every gaze shift to him again. He could leave. Draw the danger away. Return to his ranch and let the storm pass over the tribe. Instead, he tightened the beaded band around his hat and reached for his rifle. I married into this fight, he said quietly. Warriors nodded. Word was sent to Ethan's ranch hands, and by dusk, a small group of cowboys rode in to stand beside Apache fighters. At dawn, when the outlaws charged into the valley expecting fear, they found unity instead, rifles firing in rhythm with arrows, horses thundering side by side. The battle was fierce but brief. Outnumbered and outmatched, the gang broke and scattered for good. As the dust settled, Ethan stood beside Najoni overlooking the rising sun. She slipped her hand into his. You chose us, she said softly. He smiled at the horizon. Reckon I chose my wife.